The United States Navy just launched missiles from warships in the Persian Gulf at Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, this is a very big deal. It kind of seems like this thing has been building for quite some time, and it was only a matter of time before something happened. But here's what we know so far about this attack and why the U.S. Navy did it. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, let's start with what we know so far about the attack itself. On Monday morning, the U.S. military released a statement saying that it had conducted strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. Those facilities were Fordo and Natanz. These are two nuclear facilities that are deep underground, deeply buried, which makes them incredibly hard to target. That's part of the reason why Iran chose these locations, because they're going to be extremely difficult for the United States or really anybody else to target them. These sites, there's actually an enrichment plant, a research reactor, and a site that supports Iran's ballistic missile program, all located pretty close to one another in central Iran. Now, the U.S. military conducted these strikes using missiles launched from U.S. Navy warships in the Persian Gulf. Now, those warships are the Arleigh-Burke-class guided missile destroyers. We don't know the exact names of the ships right now, but I will tell you these ships have Tomahawk missiles on them. Now, the Tomahawk missile is a subsonic cruise missile, meaning that it flies slower than the speed of sound. It has a range of around 1,000 miles, maybe even greater, and it can carry both conventional and nuclear warheads. Now, we know that the U.S. did not use nuclear warheads in this strike, so likely these Tomahawks were carrying conventional ordnance designed to penetrate deep into the ground. In fact, the U.S. military described these missiles as precision-guided munitions. What that means is these are designed to hit a target with great accuracy. You see, when you're in combat and you launch a missile, sometimes you don't know exactly where the enemy is, so you might or you might adjust your aiming point to try to lead the enemy or where you think they're going to be and hope that you hit them. But these PGMs, these precision-guided munitions, are designed to hit targets with great accuracy, even targets that are moving. So in this case, a missile that could be launched from a warship out over the Persian Gulf that accurately hits a target deep underground in central Iran is a real testament to the sort of technology and skill involved here. Now, the U.S. military released another statement later on Monday saying that the strikes were conducted in accordance with international law and were in self-defense. That's a pretty big claim. That's a pretty serious thing to say. The United States does not typically say that it's acting in self-defense unless it really believes that it's true. Now, what that means is that the U.S. likely has intelligence indicating that Iran was planning imminent attacks against U.S. personnel or U.S. interests. And I'll tell you, it would not surprise me at all if those attacks were going to come through proxies like Hezbollah and in Yemen. You see, the situation in the Middle East has been deteriorating for some time. In particular, Iran's support for Russia's war in Ukraine, including providing hundreds of attack drones that Russia has used to indiscriminately target Ukrainian civilians, as well as more recently Iran, providing Russia with ballistic missiles to use on Ukraine. This is a big step up from what Iran had been doing previously, which is mostly sending out smaller units of attack drones to the front lines to be used in combat. So Iran is getting increasingly involved in Russia's war in Ukraine, which of course, the United States sees as a direct threat to their interest. And you saw just last week, the U.S. aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford transiting the Strait of Hormuz, important strategic waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. And that carrier strike group was harassed by Iranian forces. It had fighter jets flying dangerously close to the carrier, forcing the carrier to conduct defensive measures. And Iran also had small boats that surrounded the carrier and forced the carrier to sound a general alarm and prepare for potential attack. And those attacks never came, but the harassment continued. So the tensions were high even before today's strike. And you could see that the U.S. Navy was getting ready to potentially engage in combat. Operations against Iran, because you saw just on Friday the USS Thomas Hudner, a destroyer, sailed through the Strait of Hormuz and into the Persian Gulf. And this is interesting because that ship had just recently deployed to the Middle East and transited the Suez Canal. So it was only in the region for a few days before this attack occurred. So what does all this mean? Well, the U.S. clearly feels that Iran is an imminent threat. There's probably more that we know that the public doesn't know about yet. And the U.S. feels that Iran was planning imminent attacks against Americans and U.S. forces in the region. Now, what those attacks would look like, whether they would come directly from Iran or through proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, we don't know. But the U.S. clearly felt that those attacks were imminent, and they acted to preemptively defend against them. I think it's pretty clear that the US wants to send a message to Iran that enough is enough. The US says that Iran's nuclear program is a threat to regional stability. Also, again, just Iran's support for Russia and the war in Ukraine is a direct threat to US interests. So the US may feel like it's left with no other options here. It's maybe the only option left to get Iran to stop what it's doing. Now, it remains to be seen how Iran responds. This is a very dangerous moment. Hopefully things will remain calm. But it wouldn't surprise me if Iran retaliates against US forces in the region. And that could take many forms, including cyber attacks, missile attacks. Again, the Houthis in Yemen have ballistic missiles and attack drones. They could launch those against US forces in the region. And you can't rule out the possibility of Hezbollah launching attacks against Israel, which could draw Israel into the conflict. This is very dangerous stuff. It's obviously very early. Just don't have a lot of information right now. US hasn't said much about this. But make sure to follow our channel for more updates on this story. Also, please consider liking and subscribing because it really helps us grow. I'm a US Navy veteran. Thanks for watching.